Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Gray. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to thank the Petitions Committee for securing this vitally important debate today. My honourable friend, the member for Islwyn, for making such a powerful and passionate speech to introduce the debate today, and my honourable friends for Birmingham Ladywood, for Bradford West, for Mitcham and Morden, and Bethnal Green and Bow, who all made such compelling contributions, both passionate and forensic. And members across the House, I think, have shown us today that there is no doubt about the strength of feeling that we see in this Parliament. The plight of the Uyghur people is a scar on the conscience of the world. Of that, there can be no doubt. And the fact that the Chinese government continues to act with impunity leaves us all with a sense of burning injustice. It's vital and urgent that the international community comes together to speak with one voice and to say loud and clear to Beijing, we will not stand idly by whilst Uyghur people are imprisoned in these so-called re-education camps. We will not look the other way in response to reports of the forced sterilization of Uyghur women. We will not react with indifference to any efforts to destroy the Uyghur language, culture, and way of life. Mr. Gray, it's equally vital and urgent that the UK government takes a leadership role in convening and coordinating the international response. Our greatness as a country is based on our resolute and unshakable commitment to human rights and to the rule of law. And the British people know that if our country is to be a force for good in the world, then these values must be universally applied. Regrettably, attempts to show leadership on this issue are handicapped by the fact that for several years now, the approach of successive Conservative governments to China has been naive and complacent. In 2015, David Cameron and George Osborne announced a new golden era in Sino-British relations. The premise was simple. The UK would open its markets and infrastructure up to China, and in return, Beijing would reciprocate, whilst integrating with the rules-based international order. Fast forward 5 years, and where do we stand? Well, we're still running a £19 billion trade deficit with China, and the Chinese government has dealt a hammer blow to democracy in Hong Kong, committed egregious human rights abuses in Xinjiang and Tibet, and is stepping up its military activities in the South China Sea. Mr. Gray, the fact is that the Golden Era strategy has been an unmitigated failure. Successive Conservative governments rolled out the red carpet for Beijing in the hope of reciprocity and constructive engagement, but what we have seen in the last 5 years is the emergence of a China that is increasingly pursuing policies that undermine international norms and violate what should be international values, universal values. We have deep respect for China's history, culture, and civilization, and we fully acknowledge and recognize its great power status. The relationship between the peoples of the UK and China is deep, long-standing, and valued by both. And we know that there is a pressing need to improve mutual understanding and friendly cooperation. But the Chinese leadership has to understand that their breaching of international law and violating of human rights benefits no one, least of all themselves. China is deeply integrated into the global economy, and it needs globalization to work for its people, just as much as we do. But if it continues to pursue zero-sum policies that place dominance ahead of consensus and crushing one's critics ahead of compromise, then the international community will have no choice but to toughen its stance by exerting further political, diplomatic, and economic pressure on Beijing. It is against this backdrop that we are today calling on the UK government to commit to a fundamental strategic reset in Sino-British relations. We must seek constructive engagement based on mutual respect, but respect is a two-way street. The leadership of the Communist Party of China respects strength and unity and is contemptuous of weakness and division. We must find ways to cooperate with the Chinese government on crucial global issues like climate change and pandemics, whilst also challenging them when they undermine international law. To achieve this, we think the following needs to happen. First, we must rebuild our strategic independence. Successive Conservative governments have left our country over-reliant on supply chains that originate in China and open to hostile takeovers by Chinese state-backed enterprises and investment vehicles. The UK is now dependent on China for 57 categories of goods which relate to our critical national infrastructure. This over-reliance on China dramatically diminishes our ability to stand up for our interests and to project our values. We need to see a far more joined-up approach across Whitehall on these issues. Second, the UK government needs to build an alliance of democracies to champion cooperation based on shared values and promoting human rights. Successive Conservative governments since 2016 have shown that they are adept at burning bridges. This government now needs to show that it knows how to rebuild trust with our European allies whilst engaging more effectively with democratic governments, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. Turning now to addressing the mass atrocities that are taking place in Xinjiang, we urge the government to take the following actions. First, it is imperative that the UN Commissioner for Human Rights is given full and unfettered access to Xinjiang and to the Uyghur people who are being detained there, so that the true scale and nature of the crimes to be established and documented. For this to be possible, far more intense and coordinated pressure must be applied, and we therefore urge the UK government to publicly oppose China's election to the UN Human Rights Council in the forthcoming elections, and to hold firm to this position until such time as Beijing provides the Commissioner with access to Xinjiang. Second, the government must deploy Magnitsky sanctions against senior CCP officials that are responsible for human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Now, I know that the Minister will say that this is currently under review and should not be rushed. But frankly, Mr. Gray, this is not good enough. MPs have been raising concerns about the plight of the Uyghur since 2017, and the Magnitsky legislation was passed in 2018. Could I therefore encourage the Minister to provide some clarity on this today? What is the real cause of this mysterious delay? And can the opposition be of any assistance in removing the roadblock, whatever it is, so that the government can get on with taking this long overdue action? Third, the government should explore additional legal avenues for challenging what is happening in Xinjiang, including undertaking an assessment of whether China's actions constitute a violation of the 1984 Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment to which China is a state party, and they must consider infringement procedures if such a determination is made. Fourth, the government must publicly support the UN International Law Commission's draft convention on the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity, which would close an important gap in international law. And fifth, as many honourable members have raised today, the government must mobilise action across Whitehall to ensure that British businesses conduct thorough due diligence on supply chains, such that British companies withdraw without delay from any and all supply chains that could potentially involve forced labour or other human rights abuses. I trust that the Minister will give careful consideration to these recommendations, both in terms of the fundamental reset that's required, but also in terms of the specific issues with Xinjiang province. Thank you. Thank you.